The Gunner's Minigun can be tweaked around a lot. There's a bunch of modifications that will make the gun feel completely different, and what might feel comfortable for one person might not work for someone else. In this video, I want to go over 3 builds for the Gunner's Minigun in Deep Rock Galactic. Each build will be tailored to 3 different types of players: a beginner, an intermediate, and an advanced player. By the end of this video, you'll know which build is perfect for you. Hi guys, I'm Legionless, and this channel is about helping you enjoy your games more. If you want to enjoy your games more, subscribe to the channel and like this video to help me out. The Gunner's Minigun can either be really easy to handle, or can be really wild and almost uncontrollable. I've got 3 builds to recommend that will fit perfectly for the type of player that you are today. The best part about these builds is that you can swap to a more advanced build the better you get at Deep Rock Galactic, or you can use a more beginner-friendly build when you want to play more casually. These builds serve as a good starting point, and you're more than welcome to make any adjustments if there's something you find works better for you or there's something you value more. Before going into the specifics of the first build, I wanted to mention a pretty important detail about the Gunner's Minigun. The weapon's stats say that it shoots 30 rounds per second, but this isn't exactly true. In actuality, the minigun fires 15 rounds. For every 2 ammo the gun uses, only 1 bullet is fired out and only 1 bullet's worth of damage is dealt. Keep this in mind as you go to make any builds of your own. The beginner-friendly build I recommend is light and breezy. It'll be something that always gets the job done, and you won't have to panic about missing a bunch of bullets when it matters most. In Tier 1, improved platform stability increases the base spread accuracy, so it's going to be a lot easier to hit enemies. The minigun's reticle is the area that any bullet can land. You can have the reticle covering any enemy, but bullets can miss the enemy you're aiming for if the enemy doesn't completely fill that reticle's base spread. As you fire, that reticle shrinks and the spread tightens, so it gets easier and easier to hit what you're aiming for. By improving the initial base spread, you start off more likely to hit what you're aiming for, and you get to the minigun's max precision faster. In Tier 2, oversized drum adds 600 bullets to the minigun's max ammo. If you miss any bullets, or you just need a lot to shoot anything and everything in your way, this extra ammo will come in handy. Running out of ammo shouldn't be a problem at all with this build. In Tier 3, you're welcome to make your own choice, but I'm going to recommend hardened rounds for this build. This improves the minigun's armor breaking, which destroys the armor covering an enemy's weak point. As the armor gets destroyed, the weak point gets bigger and easier to land critical damage. Increasing the duration you stun an enemy is okay if you want to go with that instead, and blow through rounds would be a good substitute too. With those rounds on the minigun, bullets will rip through the enemy you're shooting and hit more enemies behind it. Personally, I think hardened rounds is better, since it's really tough for the gunner to move behind an enemy to get to its weak point, since the gunner moves so slowly, especially while firing the minigun. Making the weak point larger will make it easier for you to deal with enemies that the gunner naturally has trouble hitting the weak points of. In Tier 4, I really recommend going with lighter barrel assembly. There's a natural lag between when you pull the trigger on the minigun and when it fires up and starts shooting. This mod will reduce that lag so you can start firing without an awkward window waiting for the gun to start shooting. This window could be very dangerous and let enemies get some damage onto you, since they can get really close to you while you wait for the minigun to spin up. In Tier 5, Cold as the Grave is one of my favorite mods to run on this weapon. Every kill you get with the minigun cools it down a little, which lets you keep firing it longer before it overheats. This modification will be really strong during crowd control when swarms of enemies are coming at you and your team. Kill everything that comes one by one, and you might not even need to stop firing or slow down to cool the minigun down. This build is usually what I recommend to people just starting with the Gunner in Deep Rock Galactic, since it's really hard to not be successful with this build. Everything about this build is about making it as easy as possible to use and do well without sacrificing being able to get the job done. The next build is the build I recommend for those that are either more confident in their aim or are ready for more challenge with some more reward. In Tier 1, magnetic refrigeration increases the cooling rate, which is how long it takes for the weapon to go back down to perfectly cooled. Intermediate players are going to be more efficient with the minigun's ammo and not need to continuously fire to be effective. During the time you stop firing, the gun will cool down faster, so you have it ready for when you need to fire again. In Tier 2, high velocity rounds adds 2 damage for each bullet fired. This makes a minigun's damage per second make more sense to what the weapon stats tell you, since a weapon shoots 1 bullet out for every 2 ammo used. This increase in damage makes a minigun kill enemies faster in a skilled player's hand and do more raw damage to dreadnoughts. In Tier 3, you're free to choose between hardened rounds and blow-through rounds again, but I think this build will work better with blow-through rounds. You'll damage more enemies at the same time, which makes the weapon more efficient at crowd control. It also pairs well with the increased damage from Tier 2 and what we're going to run in Tier 5. In Tier 4, magnetic bearings is what you want to go for with this build. It pairs well with the cooling rate in Tier 1 because the weapon will cool down faster when you stop firing, but the barrels will keep spinning for an additional 3 seconds. You won't need to wait for the barrels to spin back up while the gun cools down, so you'll be able to start firing again at the accuracy you stopped at. Remember, the spin up directly relates to the accuracy of the weapon's reticule. The faster the barrels are spinning, the more accurate it is. Finally, what pulls it all together is running Cold as the Grave in Tier 5 again, so the gun can be fired longer while mowing down enemies. This build is going to be a little tougher to aim when you get the barrels started, but it'll make up for that with being even better at crowd control. You'll be able to manage the heat and cool down the weapon fairly easily, so you can still be effective. It'll take longer for the weapon to spin up, so there'll be a noticeable delay when you pull the trigger to fire, but you'll be able to stop firing, let it cool down for a couple seconds, and then fire again without the barrel slowing down. Lastly, this final build is going to be one of the best DPS builds you can run without any overclocks. This build is going to be the most advanced build out of the 3, so it'll be rather difficult to wield it the most effectively, but it's going to be well worth it when you want a really strong burst of damage. In Tier 1, improved motor increases the rate of fire, which makes the weapon get more accurate faster. In Tier 2, high velocity rounds gives a simple damage increase to every bullet from the minigun. In Tier 3, you can pick what you prefer most, since none of them will do much, if anything, against the largest enemies in the game, like oppressors, bulk detonators, and dreadnoughts. All 3 are completely immune to stun, so the extra stun duration won't help. There's either no armor to break, or the armor doesn't break at all, so the extra armor break won't help. Blow-through rounds usually doesn't come up against dreadnoughts, since you're usually facing them alone. All 3 will have some level of usefulness against the average enemies you'll run into, so you really can't go wrong with what you pick. If you really can't decide, go with blow-through rounds to make crowd control better. In Tier 4, variable chamber pressure is going to be really good. It applies a 15% damage bonus when the minigun reaches its max fire rate and is fully stable. You'll get to that point faster because of the improved motor mod back in Tier 1. For Tier 5, you guessed it, we run Cold as the Grave because it's just so good at keeping the minigun going for longer when there's enemies. Unfortunately, hot bullets sounded really nice at first, but dreadnoughts are immune to the on-fire status effect, and oppressors have a 66% resistance to it. For regular enemies that will be more affected by this mod, Cold as the Grave will just provide more value for you in my opinion. To put each build side by side so the differences make a little more sense, the first build does 122 damage per second, the second does 125 damage per second, and the final one does 176 damage per second. These are calculated if every single bullet hits an enemy's weak point, so it's not entirely realistic since your aim isn't going to be perfect, but it should still illustrate the point. Build 1 and 2 are fairly similar in raw DPS, with build 1 being easier to wield, but build 2 being able to hit twice as many enemies at the same time. Build 3 has a much larger damage per second, but is a lot harder to wield, the base accuracy isn't as good, and it has a delay between when you pull the trigger and when the weapon starts firing. If you want a couple infographics to help you make these builds, either join my Discord and check out the infographics channel, or check out my Instagram where all infographics and builds are stored. Subscribe to the channel if you want to enjoy your games more, and share this video to others you think should enjoy their games more. Leave a comment below with what build you think fits you the best. Thanks for watching.